Our next poet, Jed Myers. Jed, it was a real thrill meeting Jed when he walked in. When I had all the poems, I needed a way to systematize them because there was such a volume, and so I simply had definitely a yes box, maybe that I wanted to do another read, and a no. And it was really hard to say no on many of them, but you know, you only had so many pages. But I got Jed Myers' poems. Of course, I've never met him. I read his first one and said, wow, yes. And I read the second poem, yes. And I read the third poem, yes. And I published 3 of his poems because I was so thrilled with all 3 of them. And that was, you know, I don't do that too often, but I'm a fan of his. And Jed from Seattle lives, writes, and makes music in Seattle. His poems have appeared in many journals. He's so humble. And he hosts an open mic cabaret called the North End Forum. Jed.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Tony. You know, you're just like I thought you'd be.
Oh, what that mean?
You're like glowing, man. It's like nobody who didn't glow could have done this, you know.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I've got 3 poems. One from Fault Lines. The story of a poem is always much longer than the poem, so we'll leave that aside for now. He laughed. He was last seen on the Bremerton ferry. A late summer weekday morning. He'd stopped at the gas station, stopped at the ATM, had punched the code, was compos mentis. He might have believed he was headed for the office. Did he seem on edge on the deck? He didn't flinch at the horn blast. We know he lingered to watch the wake from the rail aft. And the gulls, his eyes lifted up to take them in as they followed the craft out onto the cold expanse. We believe he laughed along with them for a moment. This is when he was last seen.
Wow.
This poem, not much of a story, but it comes from a little journey in this region that I recently took with my friend Ashley. And sometimes travel stirs memory, and you're not writing about where you are, you're writing about where you've been while you travel through where you are. It's funny about that. Its own tender presence. I traveled along a river and stopped in a small town, wandered the street, entered a toy store, and found myself drawn to the shelves of plastic dinosaurs. I remembered some of their names. My fingers stroked rows of bone plates and prominences along their backs. The question the child I was could not pose: can a soul be so spined? I thought of a woman back in the city. She smokes and drinks her beer and whiskey in a tavern where I unwind from a day in the teeth of work's gears. She uncoils to an eased radius, lets some of us inside the arc of her vigilance. Even I, once her lover for a while, admitted close enough to catch the breeze and heat of her breath, close enough for a hint of her instinct's radiance. But such times I know to watch out for the half-drunk recoil, the old lash of a threatened animal in a hot world where the men are fathers and big brothers who'll play their power out on the girl in the house. I remember her ribs standing out, her shoulders braced against being pinioned, the hardness of prominent hips guarding the soft parts folded under the skin. I lost hope I'd learn communion with her, but sensed and sense again each time I see her sipping her third well whiskey, close to midnight in the neon and TV light of the loud place where we meet. She longs hard, down in the ancient coils, inside the unconscious belly where comfort and hurt both start, burdened by calcified ridges of dread as any beast, fendered and carapaced, to defend its own tender presence from the hungry world's claws and teeth. One more. My father was ill with a brain tumor for a good few months and died recently, and of course I've had to write about that because I've had to cope with it, you know. So this is from a little less than 2 weeks after he actually passed, called "His Ache in My Legs." A restless old man tried to rise again from a railed bed in a strange place. He did not understand where he was. He'd lost interest in food and drink, preoccupied with the train he knew he needed to catch. His breath at last, as an exasperated engine's chuff, gave out. His chest had had enough. All the tiny bellows caved. I had already left. Then his eyes went out and into their coves in his head. Now after his name we say dead. But I wake with his ache in my legs. He never gave me the directions to get to the station. I wander the beds, poke into the shade in the broken down sheds, and wonder if I'd stood by him more of my days, his hand on my shoulder, sauntered side by side with him under the vaulted beams of his belief in the world, would we have arrived on the platform, he in his gabardine jacket, I in my brimmed felt hat, on our way at last to the meeting where the souls of the lost and the living settle the score, a clay house between the whistle stop and the river, where Isaac and Ishmael play on the floor while the old men smoke and drink dark tea. If I had stayed longer, helped him rise to his feet once more, would we have made it?